it just opened my mind to the possibilities and the different quadrants, and learning that I was just an employee, and at the end of the day I was only ever making someone else rich. I was never going to be able to make the big piece of the pie, I suppose, by just being a worker.
This is Property Investory, where we talk to successful property investors to find out more about their stories, mindset and strategies. I'm Tyrone Shum, and in this episode, we're speaking with Brendan Shine, a former pastry chef who found his love for property. You'll hear how the property investor changed careers drastically and successfully built up his property portfolio with his wife, how he overcame obstacles along his property journey, and much, much more. We find out what Brendan Shine does and what his job description is.
I currently own a lawn and garden maintenance business, which I've been running for the last 4 years, which I've built up to 130 regular clients. But property is my passion. I've been investing in property for the last 16 years. And last year I decided to put my experience to work full time, and I'm in the midst of starting up a buyer's agency business. That's where Strategic Property Acquisitions was born.
He delves into what a typical day looks like for him.
During the week, I generally try to get up around 5 a.m. First thing I do is get my coffee machine on. Got to start the day with a coffee. In my house, the first hour of my day is generally the quietest, so I try to work on my mindset. So I listen to podcasts, or I try to read a book. I've always got a book or two on the go at the moment. And then generally around 6 o'clock, my two little girls generally wake up, and that's the end of my mindset work for the day. And I generally help organise them with my wife, get the breakfast, get the lunches, and get them out the door by about 7:30. And as I mentioned, I run a garden and lawn maintenance business. So at the moment I'm working 2 to 3 days a week there. I've got a guy working with me as well, so I organise him if I don't need to be there, or I work with him. And the other days I'm building up my buyer's agency business, and so I spend my other days doing that, and Saturdays I'm getting out to open homes, getting to know the local real estate agents and whatnot. And as a part of the BA business, I'm, my time spent over developing relationships with brokers and agents, speaking to a couple of clients that I've already got and potential clients I've been introduced to. So yeah, I'm doing that, and I'm researching and viewing properties on behalf of those clients and coming up with strategies and consulting on investment strategies that they may want to be doing, and looking at the trends. And I've been creating a few feasibilities. One of my clients is looking at doing a duplex, so we're just going through that process at the moment to see what it will cost, if it's worth doing or not worth doing. So yeah, that's generally my day.
Before he was interested in property, Shine discusses how long he has been in the lawn and maintenance business for.
I've been in that for the last 4 years. So I moved back to the Gold Coast 4 years ago, and we had decided we'd build our family home. Then we're built on the north coast, up on the Tweed. And so I was with the builder. I had spoke to him, and I said, I'd like to work on. So I really wanted to work from the beginning to the end on a build, just to learn all the procedures along the way. Like, I've done a lot of renovations over the year, but this one was a complete build. So I wanted to spend the time. We had the money there, so I wanted to spend the time. And there was a delay in our starting of the build. So I thought, well, what am I going to do while I'm waiting? I've done a bit of landscaping before. My dad's a real keen gardener. So I thought, I'll just start mowing lawns. That will keep me occupied until we start the build. Well, next thing I knew, I had 10 customers, 20 customers. And yeah, over the last 4 years, I've built it up to 130 customers. A full-time business. I did have 2 guys working with me, but as I said there before, my passion really is property. So last year I decided I'm going to change that, and I came across listening to a few podcasts, heard about buyers agents, and that struck a chord with me. That was something that resonated with me. So I made a decision last June to start transitioning out. So I'm at that stage now. I've got all my licenses. I've got my business ready to go. And I've just secured a buyer for my business 3 weeks ago, and hopefully that will settle next week for us, and then we'll hit the ground running.
Before discussing how he found himself in property, Shine shares a bit about his upbringing.
I grew up in a town about called Laidley. It's about an hour west of Brisbane in Queensland. It's just a farming town out towards Gatton, so that's where they grow a lot of your fruit, your veggies and everything. So yeah, it was just a country town. I think there was about 15,000 people in the town.
Did you go to school around there, or did you have to travel out?
There was a school there in town. There was about 600 people in the high school. So yeah, I went to high school there and got my first job out there when I was in end of year 9. I started working at KFC. My mum decided it was time for me to get a job, so she came home one day and she said, here's an application for KFC. It's opening up in the next town across, and yeah, I want you to apply. So yeah, I started working there.
So mum would drop you off over there as well too, and pick you up as well? That
was it, yeah. So mum dropped me off over there. I wasn't the brightest student, I just plodded along, but yeah, mum thought it was time for me to get a job, so off I went.
Shine delves into how he got into the workforce once he finished high school.
I started off in KFC when I was just coming up to 15, and I worked there for nearly 2 years. And then in year 11 at high school, there was a traineeship offered as a chef at a campsite about 20 minutes out of town. So I applied for that, and because I enjoy cooking, and hospitality was something that I did well at school. So I applied for that and I got the traineeship out there. So I did that for 2 years while I was still in year 11 and 12, and I worked out there. And then after school finished, the first year afterwards, they took me on as a cook, and I worked out there for another year as a cook. And then I decided I'd had enough and I wanted to move to the Gold Coast. So I moved down to the Gold Coast and I got an apprenticeship as a baker pastry chef. I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, so I thought that would definitely suit me.
What inspired you to get into becoming a chef?
My mum used to bake every Saturday and I would be there at home, and I used to enjoy doing that. And as I mentioned, I have a bit of a sweet tooth. So yeah, it was something I did well at school. I wasn't the most academic student, but I was good with my hands. So, and like I said, I enjoyed cooking. So I thought, well, why not? At that stage, I was like, this is something I like. It was never about the money or anything. It was just something that I enjoyed. So I was like, I'll pursue that.
He goes on to explain how long he was a pastry chef after he moved to the Gold Coast, where he actually began his property journey.
I moved down to the Gold Coast and I worked for one place for about 6 months, and then they shut down. So I went to another bakery down at Kirra. And actually, that's where my whole property journey really started. I started working in there with the owner, Todd, and he also was into network marketing and passive income. So that's where he started talking to me, at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's not much really to talk about. No one else is around. And he started talking to me about, that he was also involved in network marketing and passive income, and started introducing to me all these different concepts, about passive income, and how he was training me to be a baker pastry chef. And there was nothing to stop me from, in 4 years, going up and opening a shop down the road and being his competition. But if you have a passive income, or like I said, he was in with network marketing, he could train me up and I would be able to earn a passive and he would earn a part of it. And that really just opened my mind up to a new world. So yeah, it was working for him. He started talking about that, and that started getting my mind thinking more about, there's more than just working for the money. That I could see how he was living. He had a very nice shoot, and it wasn't due to the bakery, it was due to his passive income from the networking that he was involved with.
Shine delves into more about his previous boss as to how he was involved in network marketing and managed to run a bakery business.
Him and his partner, they owned the bakery was called Ocean Breeze Bakery at Kirra. So yeah, they had been running that bakery, I believe, when I came along, maybe about 6-7 years. And they had been introduced through someone they knew to network marketing. So when I came along and started working in the bakery, as I mentioned, in the middle of the night, being a young 21-year-old, he was like, do you save for this? He started talking to me about money and putting ideas in my head. And after a few months, he had introduced me to reading Robert Kiyosaki, which was, that was mind-blowing. When I started reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all those other books by Robert Kiyosaki, it just opened my mind to the possibilities and the different quadrants, and, learning that I was, just an employee, and at the end of the day, I was only ever making someone else rich. I was never going to be able to make the big piece of the pie, I suppose. by just being a worker.
Discovering his passion for property in such a peculiar way, Shine discusses how long he was in the pastry chef business before he eventually moved on.
So while I was in my first year as an apprentice there with Todd and Tracy, the owners, there was a girl who worked out the front of the bakery. She was doing it while she was at school, and when I came along, she was just finishing school. And her name was Rhiannon, who's now my wife, who at that stage, so Tracy was talking to Rhiannon at the same time, and Rhiannon was, she'd been saving her money for the previous, I think, 3 years when I first started there, and she was ready to buy a property. She had read everything. She was as keen as could be to buy. So when we started today, and I was already reading, and because obviously doing night shift, so I'd be finishing around 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, I would then have the day to read, and she started uni, so I would catch up with her when she was at uni, or sometimes I was reading and she was really keen. So that's what really formed the propulsion of it. And within 2 years, we'd saved up enough money, and we knew we wanted to buy a cash flow property. That was our aim. We weren't worried about growth. At that stage, I was on a limited income being an apprentice. You don't earn a huge amount of money. Rhiannon worked casually. So between us, we had saved up $30,000, and one day she was at uni and she was skipping a class, as uni students do, I suppose, sometimes. And we came across Mount Isa, and I'd heard of Mount Isa. I knew it was a mining town, but didn't really know much about it. And she sent me an email saying, I found this house for $130,000, 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a single garage, and they only want $127,000 for it. And the rentals on it's $260. And I was like, what? We had been looking for probably a good 12 months by this stage, going around Brisbane, Gold Coast, gone out sort of west back towards Ipswich, and we couldn't find something that met our criteria, our strategy. So when we came across that, all of a sudden, we both did a bit of a deep dive into Mount Isa, and, we had learnt that Xstrata had just come into town previous to this and was putting a lot of money into the town, and that they were expanding the mines. So we jumped in, and, that was our first house. We bought that. I was only in my 3rd year of my apprenticeship, and we made our first house purchase.
The former pastry chef shares with us the kinds of baked goods he would create in the bakery before he fell in love with property.
We did a normal bread run, so your wholemeal, your white, your multigrain, your sweet buns, and then we made everything from scratch in our shop. So we didn't buy anything in. So we then made all our pies, our pastries, all your different flavoured pies, and then just your standard sponge cakes, eclairs, jam and cream donuts. It was a standardized sort of bakery. It wasn't a high-end bakery. Being right across from the beach there at Kirra, so we get a lot of surf guys coming in, people down on the weekends, and then your people in the local hotels and resorts that would pop in for their, a croissant or a muffin, or, and they also did basic sandwiches and cappuccinos and everything.
Brendan Shine looks back at his time at the bakery and delves into where he learnt his money skills.
Working with them, tell the honest truth, I wouldn't work out the front much, but my now wife Rhiannon, she definitely did work out there, and you definitely learnt the costings that would come in and out. But I suppose for me, where my money skills really came from was from my parents. My parents were, average people. My dad was on a disability pension as I grew up. He had an accident in the late 80s and hurt his back, and he was put onto the pension because he couldn't stand up for too long, couldn't sit down for too long. We were a comfortable family, but my parents had very good money management skills. They put away their money. They knew what bills were coming up, and they would put away a bit of money every week towards those bills. So that definitely was an impression on me. So when I started working, my mum and dad gave me a little folder, and they said, right, okay, you've got rego, you've got fuel, you've got, maintenance of your car. If you're working now, you're going to need equipment, so forth. So that was a very good installment in me. So I started putting away my money every week, and that's how I ended up saving my money. I wasn't a big party person, and obviously I worked 6 nights a week in the bakery, so I didn't go out a lot. So I was able to save my money, and that's that's where we started off. I think we sort of got into property and we read the fundamentals from Robbie Kiyosaki and other books, and we put them into practice. And I think we were both very eager, and we sort of just jumped in to the deep end and learnt on the go. It really was a baptism of fire.
Shine shares with us the next path he took after working in the pastry chef business.
I did that for 3.5 years. I was in the bakery about 2 years. We bought our first property, and we bought a second property within a couple of months. Our mortgage broker at the time said, we only put down $15,000 on the first property. At that stage, the banks were lending out money hand over fist. So, we borrowed 97%. We rolled everything in, and it only cost us just under the $15,000. So the lender said, you could buy another property. We're like, can we? Okay. So we literally went back out and looked for another property again in Mount Isa because things were starting to move. And that's where we bought our second property. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, double garage, fully renovated house. That was a divorce that was going through. So it was a stunning house. That was $127,000. And at that stage, it was renting for $260 a week. So again, it was cash flow positive. It wasn't a huge cash flow, but it was paying the bills and putting some money into our bank account every week.
Sounds like you were able to pick up bargains at that point in time as well too.
It was. We were at the entry level of the market, and my parents seen what we were doing, and my mum was a bit cautious about it, but my dad, he was quite pleased, and he said to me, well, I've got a little bit of money saved up, I'm not getting a huge interest, and because I was always talking I want to buy another one, properties are so cheap. My dad turned around and said, okay, I'll lend you $50,000, but you have to pay me 2% higher than what I'm getting at the bank. And I was like, okay, I can do that. You know what I mean? Why not? You know what I mean? It's just sitting in the bank. My dad, I was very fortunate. Dad had faith in me. He could see what we were doing and Rianne was doing. And so he lent us our money. So we very quickly, or about another 2 or 3 months later, we had built a very good relationship with the agents up there. And one of the agents came to us and said to us, we've got a sale. It was another divorce settlement. They just want to sell it for what they owe us the mortgage. Which was $97,000 plus our stamp duty to get in. And so we bought that. And about 2 weeks after it got unconditional, the agent said, would you be interested in selling it? And we're like, well, not really. She goes, I've got someone who's really keen. It's they were looking at it, but they couldn't act quick enough. I said, okay, well, what can we get for it? And she said, well, I'll go talk, see what we can do. She came back and they offered us $129,000, and we went, sold. So in a very short period, once it's settled and, went through registry and everything, and we were able to on-sell it, we, introduced us to the whole flip concept. We'd been reading Steve McKnight and other ones, so we thought we'll put that into practice. And so we sold that one, and, it wasn't a huge profit on it, but, it was more than a year's wage for me in the bakery. So, I couldn't complain.
Since then, how many properties would you say you've bought, sold, or even have in your portfolio at this point in time?
Over the last 16 years, I've probably had about 14, 15 properties go through our portfolio. I currently still hold a couple of properties in Mount Isa. We currently hold 7 properties at the moment. So we started off, like I said, in Mount Isa, and we bought the 2 houses, then we flipped one. And then with that bit of money we got from that, and the bit of money that my dad had lent me, I started doing more research. And one day while I was researching, I mustn't have put in just houses because that's all I thought I could afford. I didn't want a unit or a townhouse. And I must have open searched, and it came up with blocks of units. And all of a sudden I seen a house and it said 4 1-bedrooms, $115,000. I thought, no, that can't be right. And I went into it, and it was an old house that had been split into 4 1-bedroom units, and it was for sale for $115,000. And I went, rang the agent. Yep, that's right. And I said, how much are they renting for? She said, $80 a unit. I'm like, $360 a week. So that was our next purchase. And that was a really big aha moment for me. Like, it's been in my reality that, we could only buy houses. I didn't even dare dream that I could buy a block of units. Like, it just wasn't in my reality. So, once that happened, all of a sudden I'm like, well, if I can buy this, what else can we buy? So we fortunate we still had the money. So a few months later, we came across a 8-bedroom boarding house, and that was 150,000. So, and at that stage, they were renting for about $60 and $70 a week. So again, I think it was about 25% return on our investment on that one. It was a rundown place, and we knew we were going to have to do some work to it. But, at that stage, we're like, yep, okay, we can do this. So that's where we went. And about a year after owning those properties, I went up to Mount Isa to have a look at one of our rentals because the tenant had moved out, and the agent had said to us, it probably needs a bit of work. And as I said, we like to jump into things. So I decided I would go up there and put my handy skills to work, which I had never done before. But I thought, why can't I do it? So, and so I went up and I was, it needed new carpets and painting. I thought, yep, I can do that. And then while I was up there, one of the neighbours, he was an electrician who worked at the mines, he sort of said to me, would you be interested in a job up here? What do you do? And I thought to myself, they're not going to hire a baker. I've got no skills in the mine. And he said, just write up what you've done, what you're doing. So I did that. And 24 hours later, I got a call from a superintendent at the mines asking me to come in for an interview. And 2 weeks later, I was working at the mines, and I gave notice to my boss. And I decided I would work at the mines. At that stage, we were still dating, and she was still at uni down there. So, we obviously, before I accepted the job, we had a bit of a conversation about all that. We weren't living together at that stage. She was still living at home. I was living back with my parents. My parents had, in this time, bought a house down on the Gold Coast, and I moved back home to help save with my money. And obviously, because I was working night shift, I didn't really interrupt with anyone else. I was sleeping during the day, and then I got up at the night. So it worked quite well for us. So, I decided I would move into this 1-bedroom unit of ours, and I would, like I said, I would renovate while I was there, and I started working in the zinc lead processing plant there. They mine zinc and lead, is one of the mines up there. And I had no clue what I was doing, but I turned up on my first day, and they said, okay, you stand underneath this machine and you just hose the concrete. And I did that for 12 hours.
It sounds very much like using your hands, and you've got a very strong skill set in that. So it wasn't really too much of a difference, except that instead you'd be standing there for 12 hours.
It was amazing. And at that stage, that was, I think, was that about 2006. They were really looking for people. So I went on to what they called the pool gang, which is just maintenance. So hosing up underneath the big grinding mills where they grind down the zinc and the lead so it can be processed, doing basic repairs with things. But so I was doing that for about 2 weeks. And then my supervisor asked me if I'd be interested in going on shift. And I'm like, well, what does that entail? And he said, well, instead of doing Monday to Friday, you'd start working 4 days on, 4 days off, 4 nights on, 4 off. And basically you'd be working up here where they learning how they process the zinc and lead, so grinding, flotation, and all of that. And I went, okay. And I got a $7,000 pay rise. And I was like, this is this is great. So I went up to just over 70,000. Coming from a bakery job where I was earning about 30,000, I was wiping my hands. I thought, this is the best gig in the world.
With all the properties he has invested in, he shares one of his worst property moments.
I would say my biggest thing I have learned was when the GFC hit. As I mentioned, we bought a boarding house, a share house accommodation, and we bought that in 2006. And while I was working at the mines, we started renovating that property, and we spent nearly $100,000 on completely gutting the place and redoing it up. And at that stage, there was a lot of companies coming into town because things were going quite well with the mining industry, and we ended up landing a tenant who would take over the whole property. And they were an earth moving company who had contracts with smaller mining companies. So we had a a lease with them for 3 years. It was set up at $104,000. It was, it was fantastic. And next thing, the GFC hit, and the company who we had, they were fine, but the smaller mining company that they were doing a lot of the work for went belly up. So they didn't pay their invoices, which then meant he had to let go of his guys, and then he couldn't pay the rent on the property. And that was a very big wake up for us. We were fortunate that we had the buffer there to cover the drop in rent of, we basically overnight lost $2,000 a week in rent, and there was no one there that we could take on. A lot of the companies were scaling back down. So it was like, okay, we really need to be aware or not take it for granted. I think at that stage, it was all roses. Everything was fantastic. And we were, acting like this was going to be forever. And that was something that caught us out. So we were fortunate that when the GFC hit, we had a buffer. We had been doing the work on the other properties. We had renovated some of those properties, and we had drawn down equity, and we had sold off two of the houses and one of the blocks of units we had bought. We had cashed up, so we were fortunate. But that was definitely a big learning curve for us, which we still hold today.
What happened to, I guess, that particular property? Did you just ride out through the wave, and then, all the other properties sort of helped that one out?
That's exactly right. Actually, it was nearly vacant for a year before we could, so it sat there. It wasn't boarded up, but we had a big electric gate on the front of the property. So, that was shut off, or we used to have chairs and tables outside because the way the property was set up, it was a big long veranda that led into 8 different bedrooms, and there was a kitchen and a bathroom and a laundry in the middle of the building. So we used to have tables and chairs out for the guys. We had a couple of barbecues there. So basically we packed everything up, shut the gate on it, put a lock on it until we could find a tenant. We didn't want to just put individual tenants back in there because we had a lot of trouble with that. We just basically decided to ride that out until it came to the other side.
That would have been quite a tough challenge, especially when you said it was like $2,000 a week. That's almost like $100K a year of income that you've lost.
It was a massive loss. And like I said, we were just fortunate that obviously our mortgage on the property at that stage was only about $220,000. So it was more the passive side of it that, we had lost, and we weren't living off the passive income. All the money we were generating up until then, we were just putting back into it. We didn't have kids, and we were very bullish about our property. So basically, as the money came back out, and growing and learning new skills, we were reinvesting. So it actually turned out when that happened, we were in the midst of building our first set of duplexes back on the Gold Coast. And we were lucky. By that stage, we'd moved into using a business banker. And when this happened, he said, well, you're already all pre-approved. You've got the cash buffer there. It's not going to affect you. So, there was a few nights of, is this going to affect our build? We've got a construction loan, but we were lucky. It didn't affect it. So we were able to keep moving and ride it out until we could get another tenant in there.
Brendan Shine talks about the aha moments where everything just clicked for him.
To tell you the honest truth, my aha moment is something that is always evolving. It really is. We have been growing. Like I said at the beginning, we started off with, we were looking for cash flow. That's what we were looking for. And then as we bought properties and we came across a multi-tenancy idea, our mindset grew. And that's something I've always tried to keep going, always try to keep learning, is that there's the day you stop learning is the day you die. There's always new strategies out there, you know what I mean? But saying that, I like to, once I get to know a good strategy, stick to that strategy, try to make it, once you get to know it, it becomes simple. Don't need to complicate it. Just stick to it, and I've always been evolving. So I wouldn't say I've had one particular aha moment. I've probably had many small moments as we've gone through. We've jumped in and doing our first development, we just sort of jumped in and went, okay. And we learned as we went, which then when we went to the next one, we took a lot of those, what we've learned and applied it to the next one. And it's just continued to fold, and it's given us the experience over the years to be able to come into new properties and to be able to see pitfalls straight away, which we wouldn't have picked up 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We were green to it then. So we've always been hands-on and learning. I mean, I love to read books, but reading books is nothing compared to actually doing it.
Shine shares the kind of strategy he has adopted to help him succeed along his journey.
Currently, we've got a good passive income sitting there. So in the last probably 8 years, we have started to move more towards development, trying to build chunks of cash. Again, as I said, when we first started out, it was about cash flow, and that's what we wanted. But we learned over the years, and as our equity grew in the properties we had, and when we started renovating, we could see the amount of equity we were building into the properties. All of a sudden, our mindset started to change to, we don't just want cash flow. Cash flow is great, but these bigger chunks will enable us to buy a better lifestyle, which, having that basic income wouldn't allow us to do. So in 2009, we decided we would try our hands at developing. And after much research, we found a block of land on the Gold Coast on the northern end of it. And a builder, I think there was some sort of health issue, and he had pre-approval to build a set of duplexes, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, double lock-up garage on a corner. And he basically just wanted to sell it for what it had cost him. So he offloaded that to us. We were fortunate that the agent at that stage knew a small builder and put us in contact with him. So we ended up buying the block of land that was just $300,000. And when the builder came in, he said, he could build it for $345,000. And the agent had given us appraisals that we would be able to look at selling it for around $400,000 a duplex. So at that stage, we were like that. Those sums add up. So we jumped in, never doing it before, but we thought, you're going to learn on the go. And we learned many things through the build. What's included, what's not included. When we started doing it, and we were on a bit of a hill, and they started building, there was this big cutout, and I said to the builder, "Oh, what are you going to do here?" And he goes, "Oh, that's not a part of the build. That's outside of it." So all of a sudden, we had to do retaining walls, which weren't included in it. So it was a lesson. You know what I mean? Next time we knew, just because the builder says it's going to be X, they always say you got to have those contingencies, but, we didn't have the foresight. We couldn't see what would happen. We knew they were going to cut the block, but we didn't think, okay, if they cut on the block, that means you're going to have more retaining. You're going to have to do something with that. That was oblivious to us at that stage. So again, it was a big learning curve.
He goes on to explain how he has learnt from his mistakes by recognizing them as life lessons.
It's the little things that are hidden, you know what I mean? And you're so right. We did a renovation on one of our units late 2009, and we replaced everything in the unit, cleaned it all up. But the only thing, it was a partially furnished unit. The only thing we didn't replace in it was the washing machine. It's only a couple of years old. It's all good. And 2 months later, got a call. The connection had busted, and we had water everywhere through the place, and the washing machine had also broken down. And we're like, the one thing we didn't do failed. It wasn't, we had tiled floors, like it wasn't a lot of damage, but it was just funny that we had replaced everything else. We replaced the fridge and the oven, but the one thing we didn't replace with, it's okay, it's only a few years old, was the thing that failed on us. So, it's one of those lessons. So now when we go in, if they're partially finished and we're renovating, we go, we'll just sell it and we'll just replace it. So it's all new, it's under warranty, so then at least if something goes wrong, we've got warranties on it. Take out the extra warranties when you're buying it, when they offer to you, because, as your own stuff, you're going to look after it because it's new. But tenants, some tenants are fantastic and they look after everything like it's their own. Other ones, they're not so concerned. They're rough, things break, and you can't say, well, you can't just point your finger and say, well, you broke the washing machine, because it could have been faulty. But it's safer to just take that warranty out, that extra bit of warranty, and you can just ring up and say, okay, this has gone wrong. I've got the warranty, and they'll come out and repair it or replace it, whatever it is.
Since jumping into development, he shares more of the details and whether he has ever sought out consultants to help.
In the first one we did, because we thought we were being smart, we bought it all pre-approved. It had been through DA, to town planners, everything had been done. We were handed a set of building plans. All we needed to do was take it to a private certifier to get him to certify the building plans. We had all the working drawings. So in a sense, we jumped a massive step of it, which, so we had done a whole development and built these duplexes, but we had never done source the land and take it through. So in that case, we didn't. But the next one, which we bought, yes, we bought it. We had to do a material change of use. So we then had to hire town planners, and we went from scratch. So taking it as a raw piece of land to, again, we like buying corner blocks because we can always split the houses so that the houses face onto each separate street, so they look like individual houses. So when people come down, they go, oh, that's a house. Oh, around the corner, that's a house. And people get a bit more privacy, which we found was always a comment we got when people came through the house. They'd always say, oh, we thought this was a house being built. Oh, it's so great that they're completely separate. You're not on top of each other.
How many of these type of developments have you done so far?
We have done 4 sets of duplexes, and we've also done 3 houses now. So we'll basically nearly do one a year. So like I said, we did our first one in end of 2008 into 2009, and then end of 2009 we bought another block through Stocklands, and then as the GFC was hitting, because Stocklands wasn't moving the blocks, they actually contacted us and they said, we have another block which is only 3 lots up from yours, and the builder's pulled out. We'll give it to you for what we had offered it to the builder, who was 30,000 less than the previous block. So it was great. So we had paid 282 for the first one from Stocklands, and next thing they offered the next one at 250 to us. And we were like, we really wanted to do it, went to the bank, and they're like, oh, you're starting to get stretched here. And that's when I went back to Todd from the bakery. By this stage, he had sold the bakery. And I said to him, because we'd stayed friends after I'd left the bakery, and I told him what we were doing. And he said, you know what? I'd love to be a silent partner in this. You guys are done so well. So he came on board as a silent partner and put up 50% of the funds. So that was our first experience into joint venture. So we literally had two blocks. We were building on one while the other was starting to go through. Again, we had to do another material change of use. By this stage, we had a good town planner and on board with us. My partner's father, he was a drafty, so that was fortunate for us. So he designed our house or duplexes for us. So my wife sat down with him and sort of said, this is what we want, and made them unique. And that was another key point we had sort of learned after doing our first one, because we had bought from this other builder. We had learned after that he'd probably done about another 15 sets of these duplexes that were identical. So you could go out, and at that stage we didn't know. We knew he was a small builder, but we didn't realise how much he had done in the estate. So, we were fortunate that we had Rhiannon's father, who was a drafty, and Rhiannon's very creative. So she sat down with him and they came up with designs that would suit the block. So we made it, we looked over the Nerang State Forest. So we made it so each bedroom had a bit of a view. And as I said, we split the block so that each one had their own driveways on a separate street. So they looked like individual houses. It didn't cost a lot more to make them unique, but we decided we wouldn't go the cookie cutter sort of design. We would make them unique, and we would aim towards the owner occupier. And at the end of the day, we sold each of them to an owner occupier. And actually, at that that stage, 2010, 2011, we actually got the highest prices for the duplexes in the estate. Most duplexes were going for around the 400 to 415,000, and we achieved 425, 430, 445, and 447 over those four. So, everyone thought they were willing to pay it. They valued up. You could buy a house in the estate at that stage for that same price, but they were unique and they were a bit different, and that was their selling point.
I think a lot of investors just want to do a cookie cutter process, get it over and done with. But when you actually put a little bit of detailed time, you can actually achieve a much better result than just to go with a standard stock and build.
It doesn't have to cost a lot, and that is one thing over the years and speaking to other people. A lot of them just go, I'm just going to buy this house and land package, but they don't consider that there's probably another 50 of those identical houses down the road. They're like buying a townhouse. What makes yours unique to the next house down the road? Why are you going to get a better price than the guy down the road? You've got the same layout, the same everything. You've got a lot more competition. Whereas if they're unique, especially, we were doing it towards the owner occupier. When people come in, they fell in love with it. It was different. They couldn't go out and purchase that anywhere else. So for us, that strategy was that we would aim towards the owner occupier. We would play on their emotions, that they would fall in love with the property, and we knew that they couldn't find that somewhere else. So it was unique, and that was our strategy with those duplexes, was to aim towards that market, and it worked out at the end. We got a good price. We were very happy with it.
Shine shares more about his portfolio and how many properties he is currently holding.
We currently hold 7. So at the moment, just on our investment side, the value would be about 2.7 million in value, and our debt ratio is about just under $2 million for everything. But then, as I said, we've always held a high ratio. So whenever we could, we would redraw out the equity. So we also have another 176,000 in offset accounts, which we've drawn back out of the property, so that we're ready to go. So if we find something, we're not having to go to the bank and trying to show our savings. We've generally got a good deposit. Plus, from our other developments, we've built up a good cash base to be able to fund to get things started. So yeah, we currently sit around the 80%, which is high. And I suppose for us now, we've got 2 little girls. We will start to bring that back. But when we were younger and we were hungry, we were happy to ride on the edge of it all. So
it's really interesting. Just the reason why I asked that is you've got passive income coming from those properties though, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment, we derive just over 4,000 a week in rental income. So we're definitely cash flow. So that's, again, we've had most of these properties now. We did a few more houses back up in Mount Isa in 2012 to 2014. I went back working in the mines, and we ended up doing prefab houses up there this time around. There were some blocks of land that were quite cheap, and rents were starting to go back up again. So to build up there was taking about 6 months, and it was about $2,000 a square metre, which meant your house was going to cost $450,000 plus to build a basic house. So we ended up doing prefab. We found a company called Westbuilt out at Warwick, and we got houses built with them for about $270,000 a piece, and they were 3 and 4 bedroom prefabbed. They took them 8 weeks to build. They brought them up on the back of their trucks. They sent their guy up 2 days before, and he just drilled the pier holes where the house was going to be reversed in, and they literally reversed these 2 pieces of the house in, dropped it down, and put it back together. And all they had to do was patch up the plaster work inside, grout the tiles, and then our electrician would come in and install the air conditioners, and the plumber would come in and connect everything up underneath. But everything else was already in the house: all the kitchens, vanities, cabinetry, carpets, fans, they're all there. And then I would, in turn, on my days off from work, and I had some friends that helped me, I did all the landscaping and everything. So pretty much from the day we said, let's build this, it took us about 4 months to have a complete They would have all their side done, and then that was with me working 4 days on, 4 days off. I could have done it quicker if I just hired someone in, but I liked using my hands, so I did all the landscaping, installed irrigation because it's northwest, it's quite hot up there. Again, it's going to be tenants, so I installed irrigation systems just to make it as low maintenance for them as possible, and so that were the last 4, and we re-rent them out now to Queensland Ambulance, Queensland Police, school teachers. They bring them in. So when we decided to do that, that was that strategy. In Mount Isa, when they want to bring people in, they want to give them a nicer home. A lot of the houses are quite old, and so they struggled to get people into the town. So when they were looking for a property, they always went to new properties. So that was, at that stage, that was our strategy to aim towards them, and that has worked out quite well. We've had a Woolworths manager in one of our properties for 5 years, and like I said, we've had the other services. They just basically change out their people. If someone gets transferred, they just generally put the next person in, which has been fantastic.
Despite prefab saving time and money, Shine discusses why many aren't choosing to use it.
Do you know, I think that there was a stereotype. I know I had it myself, and when my wife first brought it up with me, maybe we should look at this. I was thinking that they were going to be very simple, very basic laminate sort of style. That was going to be, not appealing. And I'm like, I was thinking old cabins. You go to a caravan park and you get those little cabins, and that's what I was expecting. And when we went to our first one and I went in to the display house, I looked at it and I honestly went, there is no difference between this house here and our house at home. They're both brand new. You have all the mod cons. You can have whatever you put into a normal house, you can put into these houses here. And so in our case, once they went on site, 99% of people couldn't tell that they were prefab. They just thought it was a house that was sitting 800 up off the ground. You could not tell at all.
Even though we see videos and marketing material all behind it, people just don't accept it or take it on board as they should. But it's just fascinating. There might be a huge market here potentially to do this because it would speed things up.
I think it is, honestly, it is a fantastic market. And the other side of it was like they built, where they were building our houses, they had 2 teams that would work basically from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night that would come in, and you can keep working. There's no wet days. There's no downtime. You know what I mean? You have them on a production line, and they just literally move them along. Honestly, I think until someone can see it, they realize the quality of them. It's like I said, it's just that perception that they're of lower quality. They're not going to be as high quality as your standard brick and tile house, which is not true at all.
Once you've actually profited from these developments, did you reinvest that or put that money back into the portfolio to pay it down, or what did you do with those funds?
With the duplexes we did down on the Gold Coast, at that stage, the first set we kept one lot. My parents came to visit the building site we were on, and we looked over the Nerang State Forest. We were halfway down a bit of a hill, and my parents loved one of them, so they said, if you're happy to, we'll buy one off you. So we sold one to my parents, and at that stage, I had moved back to the Gold Coast due to family issues, and we were renting near Robina. And as we were progressing, we went, it would be cheaper to live in this other duplex. So we decided to do that, and due to us always having investment properties, and at that stage, the 21,000 was available as the first home owners grant. My wife decided we would, because we had built it underneath a company structure. So we sold it from the company structure to my wife in her personal name, and she was able to apply for the $21,000. So that was a great bonus to have. And it was very handy. And she then took those funds and set up her own. She has a online travel business, which obviously today at the moment it's not the best, but she set up a travel business doing travel accessories, travel products, which was a passion of hers. So she took those funds to set up her business. But the next 2 lots that we did, at that stage, we decided to sell them. Looking back on that now, that probably wasn't the smartest idea. The growth in them, we should have kept them, but at that stage, our mindset was we will build, we'll take the chunks out of it, and so we did that. So we took the money out and we reinvested it. When, like I said, I had the opportunity to go back up to Mount Isa, this time I went working underground, and again, because I don't like sitting around on my bum, we were offered the blocks of land. We found 3 blocks of land in Mount Isa over a 18-month period, and we did the prefab property. So on my days off, I would be working on those properties, maintaining the other properties. We were very hands-on, and so we did that up until 2015. By that stage, we had our first daughter, Isabella, and my wife, was struggling, living out in the middle of nowhere without any family, which is completely understandable. So we decided we would relocate back down to the coast, and it must have been the gods. It must have been the right time, because I went into work to hand in my notice to say that I wanted to resign, and there was a big work meeting, and they said, we want 200 people to take redundancies. So I've always been a big believer things happen for a reason. When you put it out there into the universe, for whatever reason, it always comes back in some form. You may not recognize it, but when I look back on it later, I'm always like, that we were looking for something, or I was confused about something, and next thing the answer just seems to appear. So, like I said, we had decided to move back. My wife, I took some time off work, and we relocated everyone back down. I thought, actually, at first, I thought I might do FIFO, and we'll see how that goes. And that lasted like 2 months. And that's when, we decided, no, this wasn't working out. So, like I said, I went in to give the notice, and they put up the redundancies. And so I had to work another 2 months. That was the catch. They weren't ready for everyone to go straight away. So, but I took the redundancy, and I came back to the coast, and we had our block of land already down at Blamble Heights in Northern Rivers, down on the Tweed. And so before I left, we drew out whatever equity we had in our properties there. Well, I had a good income, and we got our house plans drawn up for our family home, our forever home, and we got everything approved before the end of the 8 weeks. And I took that, and that's when I took my redundancy. And as I said, we had the finances behind it to allow me not to have to go to work. But when there was the delay on starting up the build, I thought, well, I don't want to sit around again. And that's where my lawn and garden maintenance, it just happened, and it obviously was meant to be, and it grew. And
Shine goes on to share with us his biggest driving factor for getting into property.
As I said there at the beginning, my parents, my dad was on a disability pension, so there was never a lot of money. We were comfortable, but as I started working, I started learning about passive income and what it could offer. It became a really big draw for me to be able to be financially able to be able to do things that I wasn't able to do as a child. My parents weren't able to offer that to me. And I wanted to be able to have that freedom to be able to go, I want to go learn French, so I can stop and I can go and do that. I'm not just locked into work. Like, after all my readings and learning, it really came apparent to me that if you're going to just go to work and put your money into super, you're going to work until you're 65 or plus these days, and then your best years are gone, and then you get to retire, and then you get to travel. To me, it didn't make sense. So my driver behind it was that I wanted the ability to have that freedom if I wanted to stop and I wanted to travel. At the very beginning, the driver was the passive income to replace my income. That was my original goal. I wanted to earn $600 a week. That was my goal, because that's what I was earning. And I was like, if I can do that, I'm set. But obviously I was young. I didn't have a lot of expenses, but that was the goal, and that was my driver. And then as life has progressed, we've kept growing, and we've had a family now. So now it's more about being able to provide for my family, be able to provide for my girls. If I want to be able to send them to a better school, or if I want to be able to be able to put them into certain educational programs. I've got that ability to do it. Whereas if I was just working for the man, I have a set income, and it doesn't matter how hard and how good I work for the man, I'm still going to have that set income. It doesn't matter what I do. But when I work for myself or I build my property portfolio, I can earn extra money. I can create money. And every Monday morning, I know that money's going to come into my bank account, and I've only just got out of bed. And if I decide to travel, like we were fortunate enough, we worked our tail ends off up until 2009. I didn't go out. At nighttime, I would be doing renovation. Whatever work I could do, we did do, and we sacrificed. So in 2009, when we sold off one of our blocks of units and two of our houses, we went traveling for 3 months. Me and my wife, we went to Europe, and we had a fantastic experience. And that even pushed me further to, now that I had experienced that and I was able to enjoy that, it gave me more reason to pursue that, to be able to have the choice, which I think most people don't have. You don't have a choice. You've got to go to work. If you don't go to work, you can't pay your bills. You can't survive. So that's where my mindset comes from. It's about being able to provide. It's being able to provide, be able to give back to my parents. When we got married, we were fortunate enough. Again, we had the fun. We got married in Greece. A lot of people couldn't do that, but we enjoyed Greece so much. We went to Santorini on our first trip, and we had the money. We were able to pay for my parents to just come. Right? That, I don't know if we can afford it. It's okay. We will pay. We were able to do that. I never would have been able to do that if I had stayed working in a bakery. You know what I mean? It never would have been possible. It opens so many doors.
The hardworking investor talks about the kinds of mentors and resources he came across that have contributed to his success.
Do you know what? We didn't. Which again, looking back on it now, that would be something I would have been able to progress a lot faster. I did. We learnt on the job. So we did a lot of research, but at that stage we didn't. Like today, I'm involved with a lot of different networking groups. Matt Jones, for example, his resources are fantastic. I go in, even though I've done developments, I go on and I listen to his different experiences and the different people that come along. I'm involved with different Facebook property groups, and you can ask questions. So I think if I had that 10 years ago, I would be in a different spot to where I am today. But back then, me and my wife, we bounced off each other. We worked really well together, so that we were fortunate. What I lacked, she had good strengths in, and vice versa. And we learned in the trenches. We have the mindset, and we got in hard work, and as those things arose, we would then seek the answers, or we would then ask the town planner, or how do you do this? One of the first ones we done, our builder, he had never built a set of duplexes, and it came to the end when we were strata titling, and there was an infrastructure charge of $15,000, and we're like, what's infrastructure charges? And the builder's like, I didn't allow for that, and we had to go to the surveyor, and he's like, oh no, that's the, that was our cost. It's your cost to strata title it. You need to have this. And we're like, ooh, again, if we had a mentor, if we had someone, we would have known that. So that's, looking back on it now, having those team players, they're having someone to help you guide, someone who's already done it, who's further down the path, would have been fantastic. But we took our journey, we took our path, and we learned from our mistakes, and then we would take what we learned and we would then put it into the next property, the next deal. And it's been a process of 16 years of learning stuff continuously. I'm always evolving, and learning new things.
It's amazing what you've achieved in that period of time, though. I'm inspired just to hear your journey, and I think, as part of that, I guess it would have been great to have the mentors there, but nothing beats having that experience as well. And you learn those things so much faster and quickly too, to be able to apply them.
They stick in your mind a lot stronger. And that's what I was saying earlier. You can read and read, but until it happens, it really sticks in your mind. It's a big lesson, You know what I mean? I suppose it's the impact it can have. You can read it and go, oh, that's not good. But when it actually happens and you're in the trenches, and you're like, I'm going to remember that next time, or that's something to really observe when I go look at the next development or next property that I'm going to rent. You know, the infrastructure that's around it. You know what I mean? You become a lot more aware of your surroundings. It's not just the house you're buying or building; it's the surrounding connections.
Throughout his property investing journey, Shine reflects on the best advice he has received.
Always try to be the small fish in the big tank. You know, always try to be around those other people, even though we didn't always emulate that and you know, get out there. But I as I've evolved, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've definitely taken that advice. Like I said, I've joined up with a lot of different property groups and everything, and that has been the best thing I could have done, because there are so many people out there that you wouldn't even realize who have done so much. I mean, I go to Matt Jones meetups once a month, and you meet the average person, you know, you wouldn't think of it, and you start talking to them and they're like, oh, I'm doing a 10 lot subdivision, or I'm building 5 townhouses. And they're lessons that, you know, when you start talking to them, oh, you know, I didn't realize this. And you'd be like, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. You know, how did that affect you? Or vice versa. When I'm talking to them, they're like this. And I go, oh, in my experience, and you can get that back and forth happening.
If he had some time to reflect on his past self 10 years ago, we find out what he would have said to himself.
I probably would have said, you know, stick to the strategies that you're on at the moment. You know, it may, you know, for us, we started doing some of the developments and it became a lot simpler, you know, once we knew the rules, how to do it. And then we sort of divulged out a bit. We thought, no, this is too simple. You know, are we missing something? And we started looking at other things. And I think looking back on it, if we had stuck to what we were doing, finding the blocks of lands and the duplexes, I probably would have done more. We started looking at other opportunities. We didn't pursue them, but there was a lot of opportunities we probably missed because we sort of went off our path a little bit. But, you know, thankfully it didn't hurt, I suppose, our financial position when we did go off our path a little bit.
So last question for you, Brendan, is how much of your success is due to skill, intelligence and hard work, and how much of it is because of luck?
I would really say probably, you know, 25% it would be luck. You know, when we went into the market in Mount Isa, you know, even though we had learnt about Xstrata coming in and they'll put money in it, we never anticipated that, you know, properties would grow so quickly. Like, houses were being sold before they even got onto realestate.com by mid to late 2005. We were lucky that we had made a lot of good connections with real estate agents up then, so we were getting access to it. And because they knew we were ready to go when they came to market, we got access to them. But 25% of that, you know, we couldn't have forecast that. The other 75%, you know, it really took us years on the front line of learning the process, taking actions, taking the risks, you know, working through these things, learning how to pinpoint the properties and their potentials, you know, dealing with the tenants, you know, financial education, mindset, you know, the accounting side of things. Like, we managed our properties for the first 10 years, so we dealt with all the tenants. So, you know, doing, you know, the rental tenancies, you know, and making sure that they're up to date with their rent, you know, renewing their leases, you know, and, you know, when someone moved out, you know, making sure that we had all that covered. And then as we sort of moved into development side of things, you know, dealing with the local councils, compiling the development applications, you know, even though we had the town planner, but it was still learning that process, you know, getting through that, dealing with covenants, you know, when we went in, what you can, what you can't do. So it really has been a lot of the work. Being in the trenches, I would put, you know, 75% really comes back to hard work. You know what I mean? If you are willing to put yourself out there and learn, you really can succeed.
I was just going to say, I haven't really heard that many people actually manage their own properties, but you take it off. Hats off to you, because it's not easy managing your own.
Again, it was that mindset of we can do it. Right or wrong. Like now, we have property managers who look after our properties, and I deal with them and they deal with the tenants. But at the time, we were like, well, why can't we do it? We probably lost some rent, you know what I mean? We weren't the best property managers, we weren't. But that being said, the process of it all and going through it, again, it was another massive learning curve, dealing with tenants coming in, how to manage tenants' concerns or complaints. We had some tenants that were absolutely fantastic and you wouldn't know that there was a problem at the house and they repaired it. You have other tenants who would ring up and complain and tell you need an electrician to come out because the light wasn't working. And it turned out they just didn't know where the light point was. You turn, and the electrician would call and go, yeah, they didn't realize the light point was on the other side of the wall in the laundry. And I'm like, really? But, again, I've been there, so now I suppose I have an appreciation for my property managers who look after my properties when, they're going through things. It's, again, I've been there, so I understand what they're going through. So, it's not an easy job. I think a lot of people just expect miracles from their property managers and that they're just going to be able to solve everything. Sometimes it's not that easy. You're dealing with people. Sometimes, better for worse, can make your life quite difficult. Or, they may have good jobs, but sometimes they can do the silliest things, like the light switch. It was an engineer who worked at the mine, and he rang me and he said the light doesn't come on out the back. And I'm like, really? It was a brand new house, and it was literally couldn't find the light switch. He was flicking a switch and looking for the light to come on outside. And I don't know what switch he was flicking, but it wasn't the light out the back. And we ended up with an electrician there.
Thank you to Brendan Shine, our guest on this episode of Property Investory. If you want to hear more about his journey, then visit our website at propertyinvestory.com.